Hello and welcome to Money Talks. I'm your host Shllok Rawat and today we have a very special guest, the head in portfolio management for the Indian subcontinent and a director in the First State Investment, one of the largest investment firms in Asia, Mr. Vinay Agarwal. Yeah, so basically what I wanted to know first was what is the major difference that you're feeling like living in Singapore as a country in contrast to India in like work ethic or work in general?
Um, a few things, I guess. First of all, it is because it is a very international city. Singapore has people, you know, from different countries living here, and as an investor, um, that is useful to get a varied sort of perspective on things, and also sort of looking at India specifically when I invest in India, looking at it from outside in, um, from a distance helps, I think. And I have lived in India for a long time, so I have the inside perspective as well. It helps to get an outside in perspective and also helps to get an international perspective on things. The other thing, which is, of course, um, easier given it's an international hub. I mean, I'm talking about before COVID. I need to travel a lot, and it helps to be in be in Singapore from where travel is easier than what it was in India. Um, Other than that, I think these are the two uh, main things, Shlok. But at the same time, I mean, working in India was also, there were positives. I'm just talking about for my work
Yeah.
uh, point of view. That when I was based in Bombay, if I had to do a meeting, I could do that at short notice. If I wanted to meet a company or meet someone, I could just arrange a meeting for that afternoon and just go and do that meeting. Now there is more planning involved. I used to go every second month, so it would need a few weeks of planning, um, and not everything. So that's the only shortcoming, I think.
Yeah. So out of everywhere, like out of every single country that you feel, do you feel Singapore would be one of the best options in the future, for people who are looking into finance to move in there and not only to study to live there? And if you don't think it's the best option, what other country would you recommend someone move and live in for finance in particular?
Well, since I haven't lived anywhere else, it's very hard for me to answer that. But as my work in my work, I travel to different places. Um, Hong Kong, of course, is a bigger financial hub in Asia. Um, but given the way Hong Kong has changed over the last few years, probably it has become less attractive option for people now. Um, I think London is, of course, one of the I would say is as attractive or probably better, a bigger market. Um, Recently, I think Dubai, the way it has opened up and has made it easier for expats to live there, I guess, if you're Dubai could be an attractive option as well. But I personally, I'm not a big fan. Um, and New York is, of course, if you're looking as a career as a finance professional, New York is, of course, the biggest market along with London.
Yeah.
Sydney is a good option as well, but it is slightly cut off. Traveling to anywhere from Sydney is hard. It's quite far, but it is a good place to be in as well.
So you think, like judging from your previous two questions, the main two things that you should look at is ease of convenience of movement and like the different opportunities you get in the place, right? While like if you're choosing to shift there.
Yeah, I think opportunities, ease of movement, and I think it has to be a very personal decision as well, right? Where you like living. It could be weather. It could be where you feel more at home. So it's very hard for me to say. It could be quite subjective. But generally speaking, what you say is right.
Yeah. So coming to your work, what does your firm specifically do?
We invest in public markets, in emerging markets, mostly in Asia. And we started investing outside Asia a few years ago, but that's a business that we are still building. I run a few portfolios. Most of my time goes in investing in Indian companies. And I also manage some of the Asian portfolios. So I look at the regional markets.
So do you only look at public listed companies, or do you also do private equity?
We don't do private equity. We only do public markets.
Okay. So, how do you feel about the Indian market as of now? Because, like in COVID, India took a big hit, but then the market was doing phenomenally. Now now for the last 3 4 weeks before 2022, it was on a low. So, how do you feel about its future? Because, I mean, as we all know, India's going through a financial midpoint, I would say, now where now India's starting to buck up in the economy. So, like, what do you feel about that? Do you feel India's gonna become like one of the, because a lot of economists I've heard have said that India's gonna become one of the world's leading economies in 10 to 15 years. So do you feel that's gonna happen, and why or why not?
Um, yeah, I'm very optimistic about sort of growth in India, given that its demographics, the tailwinds that it enjoys, a young population, urbanization, um, sort of English-speaking population. Um, the quality of companies that are there in India, I have found them to be better uh, than than in most other markets in Asia. Of course, I'm biased being an Indian, but I think just the India is one of the oldest stock markets in the world. So the culture of equity ownership um, is higher. That some of the other markets, bigger markets, are newer. If you speak to an Indian manager about a return on capital employed or governance or board composition, succession, remuneration, those are sort of easier discussions to be had than in many other emerging, as compared to many other emerging markets. So as an investor who's looking to invest in quality companies for the long term, I find it easier to feel aligned with Indian companies than I feel with other places. And then the other things are, it's such an underpenetrated market in most categories, where the market leaders are still small companies. And if one takes a 10-year, 20-year view, there is a lot of growth potential, um, which makes me excited.
Yeah.
What can sort of the other question was, what can stop it from growing? I think the sustainability headwinds are going to be real. Um, the fact that world's top 10 polluted cities are Indian cities tells you something, that and the climate sort of ESG risks that the world faces means that India cannot use as much resources as the West has or as China has over the last 3 decades. If India has to grow sustainably over the next 2 decades, India will have to find a more sustainable way to grow. It will have to use less resources, which will be a challenge.
Yeah. So talking about China, how do you feel China's market is gonna do now? Because they've launched many initiatives and they've taken a lot of opportunities to bring in the Asian subcontinent in their sphere of influence, using the BRI and all these other initiatives where they help smaller companies and allegedly put them into debt traps. How do you feel China's market and China's economy in general is going to do? And do you also agree with the sentiment that a lot of economists keep, that China is in 2 to 3 years is going to become the leading superpower in terms of economy, and is going to overthrow the US in terms of GDP?
Well, it already is, right? It's one of the most important economies. Most of the global growth comes from China. So it is, it's a big market, um, very good businesses there. And fast growing market. It has been a fast growing market in terms of technology. In many areas, it is ahead of most other countries. In some cases, even ahead of the US, I think. Um, but having said that, it is slightly opaque. It is very hard to get a sense of what's actually happening inside the country. A good example of that is what has happened with the property sector in China recently, which has been the main growth driver for China for the last 15 years. Um, when I look at companies as well, in a lot of cases, sort of, it is harder to get a sense of numbers. Um, as I was saying, for Indian companies, you can meet managers with whom you can feel aligned in terms of governance, in terms of uh, corporate structure or return on capital employed. But in China, it is slightly harder because you don't get access to senior management teams. You get access to an IR person or a board secretary who's sometimes a party appointee, and you don't. It is harder to have long-term sort of strategic discussions with these companies. Um, so it's just an added challenge that doesn't make the market less exciting. But as an investor, those are extra hurdles to get through.
Yeah. And as an investor, and since your company does a lot of investing, what do you personally, and what are your company sentiments towards like cryptocurrency and other digitally owned assets such as NFTs and buying land digitally? And has your company started investing in them? And have you personally looked into them too?
No, no, I have not. I don't understand it. Neither does my company, and I don't think we will.
So you don't think that you don't think that the world is gonna go digital completely, and then we're gonna be plugged into a virtual reality, like completely, right?
But going digital and everyone being more digital is one thing which I believe in, which we all can see. I use more technology than I did a couple of years ago. Um, but why do we need a currency or so many different currencies? And what purpose does it? What is it solving? I can't get my head around it. I'm sure there are smarter people who have understood it and are investing in it. But I don't understand it, so I stay away. My investment philosophy is simple: that I only invest in things that I understand. So that is outside my, circle of competence. So I don't bother with it.
As I know, you're the lead portfolio management for first aid investment. So when you're doing portfolio management, do you all only invest in stocks, or would you all invest in other assets like real estate?
Only stocks.
Okay. So do you all in stocks in particular, do you all only look at the Asian market, or do you all invest in Western countries also?
Emerging markets, as I said, and most of it is Asia. Most of our business is in Asia.
Okay, yeah. So in general, do you like reading, like any books in general? Because a lot of people that I've talked to previously have all told me, and a lot of podcasts and TED Talks have also seen, the main sentiment that everyone shares is reading is very important to keeping up to date in the market, and just gaining more knowledge in a more rapid rate. So do you read, and like what kind of books do you read?
Yeah, I think that's all I do. I mean, most of my day is about reading stuff, and not just about the markets, not just about the companies, which of course I do. About companies, I don't care so much about markets in general, but reading company annual reports and reading about businesses. I guess reading, autobiographies of people helps, not just in business, but also, you know, sports people or politicians or uh, world leaders. It gives you a, um, perspective. It helps you understand people. And at the end of the day, when you're investing in companies, you're investing in people. You're backing people for the long term. the management team and the owners. Having a good sense of history is important. Um, um, I think sort of our philosophy is also sort of when we are looking at companies, we look at companies' histories as far back as possible and try to understand how a business has done through cycles and have they been fair to all their stakeholders, and really understand what the culture of a business is. So a lot of people spend more time in trying to predict the future on a spreadsheet by building very complicated Excel models. I think um, that's a in my view, it is very hard to build a better Excel model than 600 other people who are trying to do that. It is more fruitful to look at history of companies and understanding history. So I think reading history books is also important, not just about companies, about countries, about economies. Um, I think sort of, investing is is about understanding a lot of things which come together. So I would suggest read books in different areas, as many different areas that you can.
So you spoke about history in particular. In history, so do you think like a history of a company would dictate its future? If it like, do you think it would dictate its future? Like if the company hasn't done well in the past, do you think it's not going to do well in the future also, or doesn't, or like, what is your sentiment on that?
Um, I think it is important to understand the history as to where it has come from. What have, if it's a family owned business, how has the family managed it through generations? It is very important to understand that. It doesn't mean that a company which hasn't done well in the past will not do well in the future, but you will have to
Okay.
then understand why will it do better than it has done in the past. Just to give you an example, it could be a generational change where the second or third generation of a family takes over, and they are more savvy, and they are more ambitious, and they understand the public markets better as to what investors would want, and improving return on capital, improving governance, etc. So it could be, in most cases, we find when there is a generational change or change in management, a new CEO, new board members, that creates a change in the culture of a business, which leads to success. But it does not happen overnight. It takes it takes a few years at least. Um, but if you don't understand the history as to what was wrong in the first place, you won't understand what needs to be corrected and whether the people you're backing now, are they doing the right things or not. I don't know if
Okay.
I was able to answer your question, but
Yeah,
it is
yeah,
very
yeah.
important.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
understand that. Wait, so for example, I'm currently 15. So I can't invest in I can't legally invest in the stock market. So what are some things, like some practices or activities that you think that I should be doing so that I can either stay in tune to the market, or before actually investing in it, I can understand how it works.
I would suggest, you know, read annual reports of companies. Um, and you don't need to understand all the financial statements. You can go through that, and if you can understand and make sense of those numbers, and I'm sure you can find people who can help you with that. But that's not the most important thing. If you read letters from the CEOs or chairman of companies and the way they discuss about the business, it's a good start. It's a good place to start. And over time, um, you start understanding how businesses work and what are the headwinds and tailwinds that businesses face. I think a good place to start is start reading annual reports of companies.
Okay, and how would I know if economics or finance is right for me? Because, for example, I've never dived into the field personally. Like I've only heard of talking to different people. I've only heard about how their experiences were in finance, but I'm not 100% sure if that's going to be the same as me. And I'm just taking myself as an example. There might be a lot of other people who are interested in it, but might lose interest when they actually get to understand the nuances of it. So how would I be able to know if finance is suited for me?
Well, as you said, as they understand more, they lose interest. So you'll find out yourself. Um, I don't know, but you should do what you're interested in. If you feel after doing some work that you're not interested in, it, this is not your calling, then don't do it. Do what you're most interested in.
Okay, so basically you're saying it'll gradually happen over time, right?
It will. I'm sure you
Okay.
can't. Yeah.
Yeah. So one more question was when we were talking about reading, what are like different characteristics, not that you only picked up from books, but in general, that you think help you, like habits maybe that you inculcate, like you said that you read the whole day. What are some habits do you think that help you succeed in the field that you work in?
Well, I'm still trying. Um, don't think um, you know it's such a long um, career in investing that you. I think it's too early for me to say if I have achieved any success. I'm still trying, and it's fascinating. So it's always you never stop learning. You have to be interested and passionate about investing. That you keep learning. Um, so I think being humble, knowing that you don't know enough, and admitting mistakes when you make an investment mistake and learn from it is very important. There is no place for um, arrogance in investing. I think there is a bit of arrogance, and you need a good combination. When you buy something, of course you're saying that everyone is wrong and I am right, so you need that um, a bit of confidence in your analysis and in your thinking and in your instinct and being able to back yourself. But then you also need to be humble enough to know that you don't know enough, you can't know everything, and you should be prepared uh, to change your mind as well. I think a lot of people, I think, fail to um, change their mind even when um, you know new facts are pointing towards that they have made a mistake. But sometimes people get too attached to their earlier views and are not able to change their mind. So I think keeping an open mind, having um, you have to be passionate about investing, about learning. Um, yeah.
Do you think
Mm.
socializing is important? Like being able to be like having social skills to talk to different people from different companies and getting to know them personally? Because you said one advantage of the Indian market would be that you would get to speak to a lot of you would get to speak to a lot of high-ranking people in the different companies that you want to invest in. So do you think socializing is also an important aspect to being successful in the field that you're in?
I wouldn't call that socializing. What I said, sort of meeting companies to get a better view on people, is a different thing from socializing. Most of the best investors are actually sort of quite different. They're loners, and that's what helps them, taking views which are very different from what the rest of the crowd is taking. So being right, you know, it you need to be able to sort of stand alone and away from the crowd to be successful in investing. And it is incredibly hard. It feels very warm inside a crowd where everyone is doing the same thing. You do it as well. It's quite a warm and fuzzy feeling. But when you stay out of it, that's where you feel lonely and cold. But that's what you need to become a successful investor. So I would say, I mean, a, a simple answer to your question would be exactly the opposite. But I don't think that's what you meant. Um,
Uh, no,
no,
no.
so that I
So
don't think that's important.
yeah, okay, I understood that. So do you think, if I'm not incorrect, you studied at IIM, right?
Yeah.
So do you think you studying in IIM had an impact on your career in general? Like, do you think you learned a lot of skills out there that you have practically put to use throughout your career?
Of course, I mean, yeah, the best part of it is that you live with um, very intelligent people for a couple of years who come to this institute from different fields, and you spend time with them and you learn from them. So I think that is the biggest positive of it. And of course, the great professors and courses which have helped me. But more than that, I think it's the people that you live with and study with for a couple of years, um, um, goes a long way. Of course, it gives you a starting point, um, um, when you're starting out on your career. But in the long term, that doesn't matter. Um, but what you learn from people in those 2 years is precious.
Okay, yeah. So do you think, could you describe just like in a minute, a brief, like your whole journey from working in India to shifting to Singapore, and could you for someone who wants to follow the path that you've taken, like for example, doing the specific things that you're gonna do, what would be like the biggest advice that you would give someone who wants to pursue a field similar as yours?
Um, I've been incredibly lucky, Shlok. So um, it's not that I chose. I knew what at every stage I knew what I was going to do. It just at that moment I took a decision which luckily worked out for me. Um, and I don't think I'm in a position to advise young people, but I think I would say, just do what you're interested in. Just don't force yourself to do something because everyone else is doing it, because everyone else thinks being investment banking is great, or being a consultant would be great, or since everyone is doing crypto, I should do crypto as well. I think that is, try to understand what you like and follow that. So when I started working after I started with a company called myiris.com. I was there for 3 months. But that was one of, again, I was very lucky. I met my wife there. We became, we became friends there. And then later we got married. Um, and then I went to Crystal from there because they were going to start um, a, an equity research division then. And for various reasons, I always enjoyed sort of looking at companies and trying to understand why do share prices move every day? How can the value of a business change every day? So I was quite interested in it since my childhood. And when that opportunity came along, I took it. But then it didn't go the way I expected it to. And then I moved to another company called SBI Mutual Fund, which was as a role of credit analyst, uh, which also sort of helped me in understanding balance sheets, etc. But it was a short role. And then very luckily, I, I got a I got a job in a company called Arisec Partners, which was one of the best investment companies out there, I think. And I was very lucky to have spent 8 years there and learn from investing there, and learn from all the people who were there at that time. Um, and after that, in 2011, I joined First State and I moved to Singapore. Um, and since then, I've been here.
Okay, yeah.
And
So go on.
no, I was just going to say again, I've been sort of very lucky to, well, find another place where I feel aligned with the way we think about investing in terms of our investment philosophy and processes, the way what I believe in. If I was in another place where the process and philosophy was different, I would struggle and I would feel frustrated. But this is, a place which I found a good home. So that is very important, to find things which you feel aligned with, which you feel sort of passionate about. Otherwise, it can become quite frustrating. So my advice would be to do what you like and to follow that with a lot of hard work and a lot of passion. And um,
Uh, okay, so my one of my last questions would be: do you have any subject specific advice? Like, if someone wants to get into the field of finance, would you have like one thing that you would want to tell them, like in specific?
Um, I mean, it's all quite common. I'm just talking about investing. There could be complicated areas of finance which I don't understand. I'm just talking about simple investing that we do. It it requires sort of common sense and discipline. Um, and I think it's sort of a lot of subjects come together. As I was talking about history earlier, of course, you need to be able to understand accounts. You need to be. It's very psychological as well. You need to be able to understand people and um, uh, the whole a psychology in the market at any given point of time, which is less important but important enough. Um, there are lots of things which come together, Shlok, but none of it is, I think, rocket science. It's all basic common sense. Um, People try to make it too complicated, but I think the challenge is in keeping it simple. And the more simple you keep it, the easier it is.
Okay, so my last question would be: if you were not living in Singapore and if tomorrow you had to move to any other country in the world, like which country would you move to? Like, would you move back to India or would you want to move to any different country, and if any specific reasons?
Well, moving back to India is obviously the easiest decision, but it also depends on sort of timing and where you are personally, how your family is placed at that moment of time, and do I need to wait for a few years for kids to go to college, etc. So there are, everyone will have a different view on it. For me, yeah, if I have to move out of Singapore, probably India would be, um, you know, would be the
Yeah,
easiest decision, or London, where I have family. Maybe London. So of these two places, I think.
yeah, yeah. Okay, thank you so much.
No, thank you, Shlok. Thank you. I hope it was useful. Sorry,
Yeah,
I
it
changed the
was a lot
time.
of fun. Yeah.